Let's continue now looking at this amazing prayer in my course called How Jesus Prayed. We are in Unit 3, Lesson 1. And remember, this prayer, the Lord's Prayer, has marking stones, as I call them, mental reminders of what we should be thinking about as we pray, so that we can make sure that we include the most important understandings and topics within a day's time in our prayer life. We started off by saying that the first key phrase is our Father, and by that, as we talked about in the first lesson, that should really cause us to pause and think about the wonderful love that God has for us, a parental kind of love. Then we move on to this next thought, which says, who art in heaven? So we have this Father, this one who loves us like a parent, and it says basically, who is in heaven? Now, I would say almost every single one of us skip right over that because it virtually means nothing to us, except that we would say, yes, we believe in heaven. Yes, we want to go there when we die. Yes, that's where God lives, and God sits on a throne and he rules from heaven, and we certainly believe that. And yet that doesn't do much for us as far as praying, because in all honesty, it's kind of like saying our Father who is in this very distant place called heaven that we want to go to someday, but in reality I've got my problems here now, and yet God is in this distant place ruling, but I kind of need him here now. And it's this kind of nebulous idea of a place that we really can't relate to because we haven't been there, we can't see it. But Jesus, in the way that he taught this prayer, he's teaching to a culture that's entirely different than ours, a Jewish people who lived a couple of thousand years ago, and when they saw words like heaven, there was larger meaning behind it than just the way that we look at it. Kind of like we look at the word love in all sorts of different ways. We say that we love a person, and we say that we love a car or love a candy bar, or we would love to go on vacation. So there's different ways that we look at the word love. So it is with the word heaven, even though for us we just look at it in one definition. Now, let me go on and explain this better to you. So again, Father's talking about relationship. That's the first part of the prayer. But this part, when we talk about heaven, is a reminder for our own sense of encouragement and comfort when we pray, a reminder of where God is when we pray. So the Jewish people of Jesus' day viewed the word heaven in three different ways. So when Jesus says, our Father in heaven, their mind is going one of three ways. One could be the way that we typically look at the word heaven, and that is the place where God lives and rules from, where God is the ultimate authority. His way goes. Nobody can challenge God. It's his way or the highway kind of thing. The place called heaven, the physical place called heaven, where he rules from. So that's how we typically look at it, and that was an understanding of the word heaven for the Jewish people. But also, they had a broader look at the word heaven, and it was the atmosphere or the sky above. So when they thought of heaven, yes, they did think of the place where God is supreme and he rules. But they also thought of God as being much closer and more of a part of their everyday life in a way that he could observe them each and every day. Yes, of course, we know that God can observe us from heaven, but yet it was just different for them when they thought of the word heaven, and they thought of the heavens like the atmosphere, like, again, the clouds, where they could look up and they could see a cloud. Just a reminder that God is close. He's like as close as that cloud is above, and he can see us below. Kind of like if you've been, on a window seat of a plane, and the plane isn't that high off the ground, or maybe it's starting to land, and you can see the ground below. The sky above is kind of that idea. So first is this God who is all powerful and is the King of all kings, and he rules from heaven. And then there is this closer look at God as the sky above, that he can see us. He can see where we've been, where we're going. He can observe our everyday life and movement. And then they also thought of the word heaven as air, the actual air that they breathe, that constant in and out of breathing all day long, that instinctive pattern that happens in us even when we sleep. To them, the word air in terms of heaven was a very intimate thing that happens hundreds of thousands of times every day. So for them, when they heard the word heaven connected with God, Jesus is reminding them that he is like this interaction, this breath of life in and out all day long, so intimate, so close to them. Wow, what a depth of meaning the word heaven has. So when God says our Father, it's our Dad in heaven. Basically, Jesus is saying, depending on how you want to pray, how you want to view God that particular day, depending on the needs that you're praying for, you might want to choose all three of these and kind of go through them and think about how God relates to you, or you might want to focus in on one. I often, depending on what I'm struggling with, just focus in on one aspect of this idea of heaven. For instance, if I'll just choose something like as an example. If I was battling with an insurance company and I felt like it was the big corporation against me, this little guy, and I wasn't getting anywhere, and yet I desperately needed an answer, I would take that to the God of heaven who rules over all, and he is the ultimate boss. And so basically I'm going over the heads of the insurance company, and I'm praying to the creator of everything. And that gives me a lot of confidence and a lot of strength, just to know that I'm praying to the one who's above the different decisions that human beings make. That's a strong way to pray, and it gives you a lot of security. Or if I'm trying to seek God's will, and I'm praying for God's hand on tomorrow, or maybe I'm struggling with something that is happening right today, or maybe something that happened yesterday, I might choose to think of the word heaven as far as the sky above, that God is as close as the clouds that I can see over above, and he can observe every movement that I'm making, and he certainly can see where I'm headed for tomorrow. He has this vantage point, like being able to be up in a plane and seeing at a distance. So it gives me a lot of hope and security knowing that I can pray to my Dad in heaven, who is as close as the clouds above, and who has this topical view of where I've been and where I'm going. Or if I'm depressed or discouraged, or maybe physically sick, I pray to my Dad in heaven, who is as close to me and interactive with me and intimately involved with me as my next breath, or the breath that I'm exhaling. And this God pays attention to me 24/7, even when I'm asleep, just like we breathe, just as instinctively in the way that God has created us. So, the word heaven is full of ideas, and when we get to that part in our prayer, simply pick the part that you want to most identify with when it comes to God, depending on how you're feeling that day and whatever it is you're struggling with. So think about the prayer again. Our Father who art in heaven. All the different ways that you can think of that word heaven and use it to your advantage. So right now, think of a prayer concern that you currently have. Which word of the view heaven comforts you the most as you think about that concern? Is it that you have a God who is ruling from his heavenly throne, and his word is the ultimate authority, and if you're not getting anywhere with human beings and you feel frustrated because you're the little guy, or you feel like you're being taken advantage of, you can go right over the heads and the decisions of human beings and put it in the hands of God and trust in his will, because what he says goes in your life? Or is it that you, for your prayer concern, would be more comforted to know that God is as close as the clouds above and he's observing you, your every movement? Or is it that you just need to be reminded today that God is so close that he's like that next breath you're taking or exhaling? He's that close. He'll never leave or forsake you. Now, let's go immediately to the next lesson, which is the guided prayer, and we'll put that into practice in prayer.